Some 120 Roman ships are near the port of Mylae, awaiting instructions for military exercises. Suddenly, all the men are immediately called to board the ships and prepare for battle, as an enemy force under the command of Hannibal is aggressively approaching with 130 ships. The first major naval battle of the First Punic War that would define the course of the conflict is about to begin. Sicily, 261 BC. After their victory at Acragas, the Romans have successfully managed to gain the support of almost all the cities that had been allied with Carthage. But this would not last long, as the Carthaginians were the dominant force at sea, and several cities were pressured by Carthage to renew their alliances, forcing Rome to initiate sieges on these settlements, but without success, as they were port cities receiving food supplies via the sea. In essence, the war had reached a stalemate, with the Romans dominating the fighting on land thanks to their powerful heavy infantry, and the Carthaginians being the masters of the waters, and on several occasions, they were attacking port cities in the Italian peninsula, especially around the Strait of Messina. To win the war, Rome had to become a maritime power, and for this reason, they began to build ships. Luckily for them, a storm diverted several enemy ships to their shores, and their carpenters would now use them as blueprints and successfully managed to construct their first fleet. Nevertheless, some historians dispute this theory, claiming that Rome already had Greek battleships in their position. However it might have been, Rome began a series of expeditions against Corsica and Sardinia. In Sardinia, nothing was achieved, and in Corsica, a port was captured, which did not last long because Carthage recaptured it soon after, without major resistance. Even though they had started shipbuilding, the Roman navy was inferior to that of Carthage. The main reason was that Roman ships were much heavier and slower. The Republic was not in position yet to challenge its enemy. Aware of their inferiority, Rome sent a fleet of 120 ships to Sicily, with the intention of training their men through small military operations to develop the necessary skills to be able to fight on the high seas. The forces were commanded by the consuls of that year, with Cornelius Scipio in charge of the naval force, and Gaius Duilius having command of the infantry. Meanwhile, a Carthaginian army under the command of a general named Hamilcar began to siege the city of Segesta. Clearly, Carthage was not going to give up the fight on land, and they were ready to take back the whole island by force. One day, Scipio received information that the garrison of the island of Lipara was willing to defect to Rome. Undoubtedly, this was a good opportunity for the newly appointed fleet commander. Lipara was a strategically important point which was under Carthaginian control. For this reason, and despite the fact that his troops were inexperienced in maritime combat, he decided to go there with a small force of only 17 ships. Some sources say that this was a trap, and that the idea of Lipara switching sides was false, given as bait in order to tempt the Roman commander. Be that as it may, at this time a Carthaginian fleet of 130 ships was stationed in the city of Panormus under the command of Hannibal Gisco, the same general who had been besieged at Acragas years before. Whether he found out through spies or because it was indeed a trap, Hannibal sent some 20 ships during one night towards the port of Lipara, and after surrounding the port, attacked. This was the first maritime confrontation of the First Punic War, in what is known as the Battle of the Lipara Islands. Hannibal's secret weapon was that some of his ships had a metal-armored front and had several men who rowed, so they were able to charge at high speed against an enemy ship and inflict damage to the armor, which would cause it to sink in a short time. The Carthaginians were much more experienced, so they quickly prevailed over the Romans, who were forced to abandon their ships and flee inland. But they were all captured, including Scipio, and to his humiliation, Carthage demanded a ransom, after which Scipio was released. The loss of the small fleet further secured Carthage's dominance of the sea, and Rome needed to find a solution, or they would soon lose the rest of their ships. As for Hannibal, his troops were highly motivated, and having information that most of the enemy naval force was at Mylae, he soon launched an offensive. They were confident of their superiority, especially after the triumph at the Lipara Islands. However, some sources say that after Scipio's defeat, it was Duilius who went out to seek battle. Be that as it may, the Romans prepared to fight in what would go down in history as the Battle of Mylae. Hannibal ordered the initial attack, and his men launched flaming arrows at the enemy vessels, while several of his ships charged at full speed to inflict as much damage as possible. The strategy was clear. It was just to sink the Roman ships and then take the port. The first clashes shook the waters, often so strongly that several soldiers fell into the sea. Immediately thereafter, the Carthaginians would fall back and charged again at full speed, ramming against the Roman vessels. But not everything seemed to be going according to plan. As the hours went by, several of the Carthaginian ships were getting stuck after colliding with the enemy, and to make matters worse, their crews were being boarded. This was possible thanks to a new invention that the Romans had attached to their ships. The inventor was a Greek mathematician from Syracuse named Archimedes, none other than the one who would go down in history with the famous phrase, Eureka. However, some historians question whether it was Archimedes himself who invented it, but in essence, the device was called corvus. This instrument was like a giant ladder attached to the masthead of each ship, which was dropped just after an enemy boat collided with them. Having a large point or hook, it could catch it, and in this way, the Roman infantry was able to board the enemy crew. Incredibly, about 30 ships had been hooked with this ingenious tool, and to counter it, the Carthaginians decided to make a pincer movement, attacking from the sides. But this didn't work since the corvus had a central axis, which allowed it to rotate as needed to catch ships no matter from which direction they came. Another 20 boats were captured and subsequently boarded, and the superiority of the Roman infantry soon got the better of the enemy. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Hannibal ordered a retreat with what was left of his fleet. The aftermath of the battle was disastrous for Carthage. With 50 ships boarded and captured, there was no doubt that Rome had found a way to get the upper hand. The losses suffered by the Romans were minimal. Whether it was Archimedes himself who came up with this idea or not, what is certain is that it played a decisive role in the outcome of the battle. Thanks to the corvus, the Republic was able to obtain their first major victory at sea, and undoubtedly this set the stage for what would allow the Romans to dominate the waters and expand their power across the region for centuries to come. After this victory, Duilius advanced inland and forced Hamilcar to abandon the siege at Segesta, so that the Roman victory, both on land and at sea, had been total. At least for now, since we are in the 4th year of the war, and soon we will publish Part 3, where we will see the new plans, both of Carthage to recover Sicily and of Rome to strike an accurate blow in the capital itself. So do not forget to subscribe. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time.